things just a little bit. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. This is a live reaction video, which falls under DCMA. I will be stopping frequently. This video actually is free on X. So it's not under any kind of a paywall. So the content is free for anyone who wants to watch it in its entirety. I will be stopping. We will be reacting and talking about various points throughout this episode. So if that's something that you don't like, you can go watch it for free under his X page. So let's go ahead and get started.
Starting next week. But first, our interview with Bobby Kennedy Jr., his first since endorsing Donald Trump on Friday. Here it is. How you see it?
Yeah.
If your life, well, in your case, your whole life in the American ruling class, and both of you decided that it was corrupt and that you were going to say so out loud at great risk to both of you. And so it was probably just a matter of time before you aligned in some way. Is that how you see it?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's been a bunch of realignments, political realignments, about 4 or 5 throughout American history. And I think we're going through one right now with the Democratic Party and with both political parties really changing in this very dramatic way. And you and I talked earlier about the transformation of the Republican Party into the party of environmentalism.
Yes.
And, where the Democratic Party has one environmental issue, which is this carbon orthodoxy, which ends up benefiting, the oil companies and BlackRock and Goldman Sachs with offshore wind and carbon capture, $100 billion carbon capture projects, which is part of just the strip mining of the middle class. And it's the only issue you can talk about in the Democratic Party. I got into the environmental movement to do habitat protection, to do wildlife conservation,
exactly.
to get toxics out of our kids.
Amen.
And none of these are issues that Democrats are big, profound realignments. And it's not only on that issue, it's really the domination of this corrupt merger of state and corporate power that is happening in Washington, D.C. now, where our democracy has really been subverted by the industries that have taken over the regulatory agencies, and and transformed them into sock puppets for corporate profit taking, and basically wholly owned subsidiaries of the industries they're supposed to regulate. And the Democrats, for a variety of reasons, and I watched it happen over many, many years, have clung to this illusion of these democratic institutions, that they're still democratic, and they have a belief we all have the capacity to judge ourselves on our intentions rather than our actions.
Yes.
Right? And
I've been there.
And the Democratic Party judges itself, it sees itself, my friends who are Democrats, see themselves as part of the good guys, the white hats, and that, they're like the good guys who are in Fort Apache, surrounded by the forces of barbarism that are about to storm the gate, and they're the only ones. The only way to keep it at bay is to elect a president who has dementia, and because you're voting for the apparatus, and you're not voting for or another president. Then to handpick a presidential candidate without any elections, to basically get rid of democracy in order to save it, and handpick a candidate who in 40 days now has not given a single interview on any media outlet. And I think about when my uncle and father would think about that. They prided themselves on being able to go on debate. It was the centerpiece. The whole function of democracy was to anneal ideas in the furnace of debate and have them rise up in the marketplace of ideas. And the idea that, and we had this British tradition of Churchill and the others and the House of Commons, and being able to defend their policies and being forced to defend their policies articulately, eloquently. And, my uncle and father just thought ideas are important and we should be able to defend them. And if you can't defend them, there's something wrong with you.
Yes.
And, why? So we have a presidential candidate that was selected by the Democratic Party who can't do that. And, one of the things that my uncle and father will always think about is how do we look to the rest of the world, right? They were conscious that America was the template for democracy. When we created a modern democracy in 1789 or 1791, when the Bill of Rights was ratified, we were the only democracy on earth. By 1865, during the end of the Civil War, there were 5, and they were all modeled on America. And by the time my uncle took office, there was about 150, and by the end of the 60s, there's 190. They're all based on American model. And, we very much were the exemplary nation. We were the example of democracy around the globe, and they were very conscious. They were embarrassed at first by the civil rights movement because they said, what is the rest of the world going to think about it? And then they realized, well, we better correct, the problem.
Yeah.
Because, but everything that they did, they were conscious that they were being watched. Well, what is the rest of the world think of American democracy right now? That, we have in one party selected a man with dementia to lead the free world, and then turned around and picked a woman who cannot give an interview. She cannot defend her vision or America.
It's not that she can't do an interview. It's that if her policies were to come to light and what she really wants to do, nobody will vote for her. There's no way that anyone is voting for Kamala Harris if they know what her true agenda is. I've said this on previous shows that Joy and Joyous is a World War II era propaganda that they used in Germany to make everyone feel like everything is just happy, happy, joy, joy. Everything is going to be just fine. And that is kind of that is what they are trying to do. Bring us back to that era. So her policies, if she did an interview and it was honest and she did speak her mind, then the interview would look horrible. So her interviews look horrible right now because currently, if she was speaking from the heart and she was speaking from the mind, I guarantee that she would have a very fluid interview. However, she doesn't speak her mind and from the heart. So it's always really awkward and she stumbles because they're talking points that are given to her to kind of just try to get elected somehow, some way. So they put this agenda out there, this propaganda out there about joy and joyous and all that type of stuff.
America's record in the world. And then she gave this, Vice President Harris gave this speech at the convention that was written by neocons. And they had CIA directors talking at the Democratic convention, military people talking at the Democratic convention. My father and my uncle were the party of anti-war. My uncle was asked by his best friend, Ben Bradley, one of his 2 best friends who ran the Washington Post, what do you want on your gravestone, your epitaph? And my uncle said immediately he kept the peace. He said the primary job of a president of the United States was to keep the country out of war. He said he didn't want children in Africa and Latin America and Asia, when they heard about the United States of America, to think of a man with a gun. They wanted them to think of a Peace Corps volunteer and the Alliance for Progress and USAID, which were programs that he created to build the middle class, to end run the oligarchs, end run the military juntas that used to receive U.S. aid, and instead go directly to the poor and build institutions, education and health and all of the institutions of democracy to continue to model it.
So the the JFK era, his uncle's era, which was his 1963 was when he was assassinated in November. That era, he wanted peace. Back then, the Democratic Party was anti-war, anti-peace. I mean, not anti-peace, anti-war and strength through peace, right? They wanted his uncle, JFK, would go and he would give milk cartons to countries. He would actually do things to help their countries prosper, to build alliances versus go in there, invade secretly, take their resources, devastate their country, and leave them for poor. So the Democratic Party of today is not the Democratic Party of what it was back in 1963. And people still have these ideals that it is the way that it was. They're hoping that just by magic, out of thin air, it's going to go back to the way it was. It's not going to, unless if that's what their values are, they want to go back and restructure it and kick out these way far left crazies. It's going to remain the same. The far left of crazies are going to continue to try to take over.
It for the rest of the world and live up to what we were supposed to be doing, which is to encourage the growth of democratic rule. So now you have we have a system that's produced people who, a candidate in the Democratic Party who can't even defend America's record in the world, and who is parroting this kind of warmongering, military domination ideology that's gotten us in such trouble. It's caused a calamity in our country. It's gutted the middle class. It's made us a pariah around the globe. It led to the rise of BRICS. It's leading to the rise of totalitarianism all over the world. And
so Dozer is saying there has been a party transformation. And yes, he's 100% correct. There has been a complete party transformation, and it happened organically, or maybe it was strategically with Donald Trump. He took the populist people from the Republican Party and the populist people from the Democratic Party and some people from the Libertarian Party, and he kind of created this new movement. And there's some people who were part of the MAHA, which was RFK Jr.'s slogan. I'm going to call him Bobby if I can remember, because it's just easier to say. So Bobby had MAHA, which was Make America Healthy Again. And then we have MAGA, which is Make America Great Again. Well, these two parties, I never felt this way, because I like RFK. I've always liked him. I just didn't feel he was the right person at the time to be leading the country, because there's so much politicking going on at the Capitol, and there's a lot of things that need to be done. Anyway, so this party, he took all of these populists, brought them together, and pretty much created a new party, the Unity Party. It's not on the books. We still have Democrat and Republican, but he did the impossible. He united a bunch of Americans by bringing RFK onto his camp, and by Tulsi Gabbard having people in position that are going to actually help with a transition team, which will be in charge of hiring and firing people who are not doing what they are supposed to do. And I think this is a great, great thing for our country. This is a great thing. Leave behind these crazy leftists and leave aside these crazy radical right leaning, because there's radicals on both sides. There is this happy medium where most of the country lies. This is where most of us are at.
I'd say this finally, that if you really look at what's happening in the Democratic Party today, it's a party that the word demos in Greek means people. But it's a party that's lost faith in the people. It's a party that needs ironclad control. So they didn't trust anybody to have a real election. They got rid of the primaries because they didn't trust the people. They then handpicked Vice President Harris with no election, no even pretense of election, because they didn't trust the people. And they're the party now of censorship. And
how can you have a democracy with censorship?
You cannot have a democracy. They're absolutely incompatible. And everybody knew that. Everybody, you and I were raised reading Orwell and Aldous Huxley and Robert Heinlein and Alexander Solzhenitsyn and all of these other books that were part of classical literature that was taught in every American classroom that said the first step to totalitarianism begins with censorship. It's the first step down that slippery slope. And there's no time that we look back in history and say the people who were censoring speech were the good guys. They're always the bad guys, because we know that they're the guys who are going to end up cracking the whip on us all and being our overlords. And then the whole thing about, like, you and I have talked about that clip of Tim Walz, Governor Walz, saying that government should be the ultimate arbiter of what is protected speech and what is not. He said if something that the First Amendment does not protect, misinformation and disinformation, but it does. The First Amendment was written to protect not only true speech but false speech, and speech that it wasn't there and it's unnecessary, to protect the kind of speech that everybody wants to hear. It's there to protect the kind of speech that nobody wants to hear.
Right. And especially speech that is critical of the people in charge.
Exactly.
And so in their current formulation, misinformation is defined as any speech that criticizes the job that they're doing. So with that in mind, you see the Biden administration encouraging France, Macron, to arrest the owner and founder of Telegram, Pavel Durov, who's now, as of right now, in a French prison. That seems like, that's the hallmark of dictatorship.
Do you guys realize that he was lured to France? I don't know if you guys know this. So he was lured by Macron, promised that he would make him a citizen if he brought his company to Paris, France. So somehow he got tricked and lured into going there. If you guys don't know, the owner of Telegram, he would not take down stuff or censor stuff that people were posting on Telegram. And so they weren't happy about it. But he even did it both directions. He didn't censor the government and he didn't censor the people. He just left it open and free. And they've been angry at him and mad at him and trying to figure out how to stop this form of communication from continuing on. So that's kind of the backstory of that.
Dictatorship, it sounds to me.
Yeah, well, we've lost Europe. Europe does not have free speech. Look what's happened to Elon Musk. And Elon Musk should be the hero of the Democratic Party. Of the old Democratic Party, he wouldn't be the hero. Somehow he became a villain because he was actually the only platform that would allow free speech on his platform. And he's now become a villain because of it, because the Democratic Party does not believe in the people. If you don't believe in free speech, it means because you don't trust the people. You don't trust them to figure it out on their own, to have information on which they can base their ideas and their notions and their beliefs.
And their votes.
And that the government has to protect them from dangerous information, from things that might put bad ideas into their heads. And it's very patronizing, but it's also very manipulative and conniving, and really it's exactly the opposite of democracy. And you will not find a single Democrat who will criticize it. It's really astonishing to me, because the Democrats always like to, when I endorse Trump.
I don't think that it's not that they don't want to criticize it. I think they realize that there's consequences to it. It's groupthink, right? If you step outside the group, you are going to be kicked out of the group. You must stay within the bounds of the groupthink. And if not, you lose everything. You'll lose your reputation. You can lose your career. There's all kinds of things, and they are vindictive, and they will go after you hard. So say you think a certain way, and then you change your mind, then all of a sudden you're the bad guy. They started day one. They started attacking RFK's Jr.'s past. He said, I know I had a colorful past. I know that I did coke. I know that I did inappropriate things when I was younger. He admitted to that. Why? Because that way they can't use it against him. But that's the first thing that they did as soon as he backed Donald Trump. They also are trying to make it to where he has to stay on the ballot in Pennsylvania. Yet they're still trying to get Jill Stein removed from the ballot in Pennsylvania. So please tell me how this makes any kind of sense. And free speech, yes, they stifle your speech. They do not want us collaborating. They don't want us talking together. They just want us to be like, oh, this is the way the world really is. Everyone, we've woken up.
Trump, the big, the kind of the fulcrum of the centerpiece of the text of hatred that I got back, this kind of seething anger so many Democrats was, well, look what he did on January 6th. Okay, January 6th was a bad day in American history. And what President Trump did there, in my view, was very bad. It was reprehensible. But was the Republic really at risk? We have the U.S. military. We have the National Guard. They have all the institutions. We have Congress. We have all these institutions of government. And there was a mob of people, most of them who probably didn't know what was happening. Some of them were very, very badly intentioned and were breaking the law. But it wasn't a threat to the Republic. What is a threat, and this is what you cannot explain to a Democrat now, and it's astonishing to me. What is a threat is when the government is censoring your speech, political speech. And, I just won Tucker last week.
But that was the centerpiece of Democratic ideology was.
I'm sure that most of you guys know this because I have quite intelligent people that follow me, that engage with me. Political speech is supposed to be the most protected speech in our country. It is the most protected speech. They're not supposed to be able to fire you because of your political leanings. They're not supposed to discriminate against you because of your political leanings in all kinds of ways. And in the last I guess it's been longer. Has it been longer than 4 years? It feels like a century, to be completely honest. When Donald Trump broke the matrix and he beat Hillary Clinton in 2016, he broke the matrix. He beat their the ways that they cheat. And we're still going to go over that Eric Schmidt whistleblower. He's not the whistleblower, but he did a bunch of research into how the different platforms manipulate data and how they, through their algorithms, allow specific people with certain leanings to only see certain things. But that's going to be really exciting. I'm planning on doing that on Friday night. YouTube's not working correctly? Are you being serious? I'll have to go look at it. Are you being serious? I guess I haven't looked at my emails to see if I've gotten a strike. I guess I should check that out. I'll log in just a second. We'll play this for a minute.
Was free speech.
Exactly. I mean, the word liberal means free speech. That's where it comes from. Oh,
Must be weird for you being named Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and spending your entire life in this world. Like what's that like?
Let me just say this. I won a lawsuit. I won a new judgment, and my lawsuit, Kennedy versus Biden last week. And Kennedy versus Biden was part of two lawsuits that were brought, one by the attorney generals of Missouri and Louisiana, and the other by me for the same issues, which was the Biden administration's censorship of speech. And so there's a series of decisions. There's a 155-page decision. The attorney general's case went up to the Supreme Court and was rejected because the Supreme Court found that those attorney generals didn't have standing to sue because they weren't directly harmed. My case this week, the federal judge Doty said Kennedy does have standing to sue. And he reissued his injunction against the Biden administration. So I have an injunction right now against the Biden White House to enjoin them from censoring me, which they've been doing. The 155-page decision by Judge Doty details everything that happened. 37 hours after he took the oath of office, President Biden's White House opened up a portal for the FBI to begin to have access to social media posts on all the different social media sites. And the FBI then invited in the CIA, DHS, the IRS, and CISA. CISA is this new agency that is the center of the censorship industrial complex that is in charge of making sure Americans don't hear things that their government doesn't want them to hear. And those agencies and other agencies, including the health agencies like CDC, were given access to go into the social media sites and change posts and slow walk things and shadow ban posts. That it was part of that effort. They removed my Instagram account. I had almost 1 million followers. They say it was for misinformation, but they could not point to a single post that I ever made that was factually erroneous. And they actually, Facebook pushed back in the email chain. You can see Facebook pushing back at the White House and saying, wait a minute, he's not.
I wonder how many files that he was able to get from the Twitter files that were sent, because he did discovery. So that Elon did release a lot of stuff to the public. I wonder how much. I mean, obviously there's stuff that still hasn't been released that we don't know about. I'm really curious to see if he got a lot more of that information through discovery.
This isn't misinformation. This is not factually erroneous. What they're saying is actually true. And they had to invent a new word, which is called malinformation, which is information that is factually true, but nevertheless inconvenient for the government. And that became disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. That's what that is. So everybody, and
isn't that illegal? That's illegal.
Yeah, and the emails show that Facebook, the people said they were saying about the White House in their private emails with each other. These people are cynical, terrible people. And they knew what they were doing was breaking the law. But they were under tremendous pressure. I mean, Facebook has all these deals with the government and, as do all the media companies with the intelligence agencies and elsewhere. Plus, the White House was overtly telling them that they were going to, if they didn't comply, that their Section 230 immunity was in jeopardy. So Section 230 immunity.
Yes. So he said so the White House pretty much said that your Section 230 is in jeopardy if you do not comply and you do not censor these certain groups of people. Section 230, what it does is it gives them protections from any kind of a lawsuit for things that people post on their websites. So they're not responsible for what people say because it's a free platform and everyone is there. As long as it doesn't go against like hate speech or inciting direct violence to people, then the Section 230, they killed my podcast? Are you being serious? I'm confused. This is free. Interesting.
Is just so that your listeners know what it is. I used to write for the New York Times regularly. Every time I wrote an article, lawyers would call me and fact check everything in that article. Because if I wrote something that was defamatory in that article and somebody was defamed, that person could sue me, but they could also sue the New York Times. So the social media site said, we cannot hire lawyers to look at every post and call the people and check on it when, on Facebook or Instagram. So if this industry is going to function, we need to be able to not be liable